Since when did wearing a cross become a crime? Pam Bondi's silent expression of faith triggered a storm in court, and a six-figure fine. But what she said in response turned the spotlight onto the judge, and sparked a national debate about freedom, faith, and power. $100,000 for a cross? That was the jaw-dropping headline that exploded across news outlets, social media feeds, and talk shows nationwide. It wasn't a clickbait stunt or a misprint, it was real. Former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, a name many recognize from high-profile legal and political arenas, had just been fined a staggering $100,000. Her crime? Not bribery, not obstruction, not even contempt of court. No, she was fined for something millions of Americans do every single day, something so ordinary and personal, it shocked the conscience of the nation: wearing a Christian cross necklace. Let that sink in. The setting was a highly publicized court proceeding. The case itself was politically charged, with media swarming outside and reporters live tweeting from inside. Pam Bondi, a seasoned attorney known for her no-nonsense legal style, entered the courtroom wearing a modest, silver cross pendant. Something she had worn countless times before in public and professional life. Nobody could have predicted the chaos that necklace would cause. As she stood before the court, prepared to represent her client in a legal matter unrelated to religion or personal expression, a complaint was filed, quietly, yet deliberately, by a member of the opposing legal team. Their claim? That Bondi's cross constituted a religious display that violated courtroom neutrality rules. According to the complaint, the cross might unduly influence the jury, imply bias, or even intimidate others present in the courtroom. At first, many thought it was a joke. A desperate legal tactic, perhaps. But then the unexpected happened: the judge didn't just entertain the complaint. He agreed with it. In a move that would soon stir national outrage, the judge ruled that Bondi had violated courtroom protocol by wearing a visible religious symbol and, incredibly, imposed a $100,000 fine for what he described as a willful and inappropriate act of personal expression in a professional setting. The courtroom fell silent. Cameras flashed. Reporters looked at one another in disbelief. This wasn't just about a necklace anymore. It was about freedom, faith, and the fine line between professionalism and personal rights. Reactions were immediate. Legal analysts across networks called the ruling unprecedented and constitutionally questionable. Social media blew up within minutes. Some were outraged. Others were confused. How could a cross, something so foundational to millions, be labeled offensive in a courtroom? And then came the bigger questions. If Pam Bondi could be fined six figures for wearing a Christian cross, what does that mean for people of other faiths? What about someone wearing a yarmulke? A hijab? A religious bracelet? Would those symbols be fined too, or was this targeted? Bondi herself responded swiftly and powerfully. Appearing later that evening on a major news network, she addressed the controversy head-on. If wearing a cross is now considered an offense in this country, and one that costs $100,000, then we've lost far more than courtroom neutrality. We've lost common sense, and we've lost sight of the freedoms this country was built on. Her calm yet unwavering response set the tone for what would become a legal and cultural battle watched by millions. Bondi's legal team quickly filed an appeal, not just to overturn the fine, but to challenge the core principle behind the ruling. They argued, convincingly, that this wasn't about courtroom protocol. This was about religious freedom. This was about constitutional rights. And this was about selective enforcement. Because here's the kicker: evidence began to emerge that other attorneys had worn religious items in that very courtroom, from religious head coverings to symbolic bracelets, without consequence. The hypocrisy was undeniable. And public sentiment only grew stronger. Commentators from both conservative and liberal circles started asking, was this really about the cross, or was it about who was wearing it? As the days unfolded, what started as a courtroom fine became a national conversation about the role of religion in public life, freedom of expression, and how far the justice system can, or should, go in enforcing neutrality. And at the center of it all stood Pam Bondi, not just a lawyer, not just a public figure, but now a symbol of defiance, conviction, and constitutional clarity. What happened next? How did the appeal unfold? Did the judge face consequences for what many called an embarrassing overreach? Stay tuned, because this story isn't just about a cross, it's about the crossroads of law, liberty, and what it means to live in a truly free country. Let's rewind. Before the national headlines. Before the outcry. Before hashtags like Stand With Pam and Cross Freedom started trending, there was a courtroom, a routine legal proceeding, and a quiet moment of personal faith. Pam Bondi, former Florida Attorney General, seasoned legal expert, and now a well-known media contributor, had entered a high-stakes political courtroom as part of a legal team representing a conservative client. The case was already drawing attention. Politicians, activists, and media outlets had their eyes locked on every detail. But no one expected the real controversy to come from a simple necklace. Bondi's necklace was a small silver cross. Modest in size, resting just below her neckline, elegant, subtle, and by all standards, unobtrusive. Not a word was said about it during opening arguments. Not a single courtroom observer was seen reacting to it. And yet, that tiny, personal symbol of faith would soon be treated like a legal weapon. Somewhere during the day's proceedings, reportedly during a recess, a complaint was filed. Not from the judge, not from the jury, and not even from a neutral observer. It came from a member of the opposing legal team, who claimed that Bondi's visible cross was a religious display that violated the court's rules on neutrality and decorum. Yes. You heard that right. The complaint alleged that the cross could unfairly influence the jury by subtly signaling religious authority or moral high ground. It went on to claim that it might make opposing counsel feel intimidated, as if Bondi was using her faith to assert superiority. In short, the cross, a centuries-old symbol of Christian faith and sacrifice, was now being portrayed as a tool of psychological manipulation. Most observers thought the complaint would be tossed out immediately. After all, courts in America have long allowed quiet expressions of personal faith, especially those that aren't verbal or disruptive. From headscarves to bracelets to tattoos, religious identity has historically been protected under the First Amendment, and upheld by the courts. But that's not what happened. To everyone's shock, the judge accepted the complaint. Not only that, he scheduled an emergency review of Bondi's attire and ruled, within hours, that she had violated the courtroom standards of neutrality. The result? A $100,000 fine. Yes, $100,000, for wearing a cross necklace. The ruling cited willful disregard for the rules of courtroom decorum and accused Bondi of introducing religious bias into the proceedings. According to the judge, her necklace had crossed the line between personal expression and inappropriate influence. The courtroom, filled with journalists and legal experts, went silent. You could feel the tension in the air, disbelief, confusion, and outrage swirling all at once. People asked, was this really happening in the United States of America? Bondi, for her part, remained calm. She didn't cause a scene. She didn't protest in the moment. But it didn't take long for her response to echo far beyond the courtroom walls. News outlets pounced on the story. Cross costs Bondi $100,000, read one headline. Christian symbol now a courtroom offense, asked another. Legal experts flooded panels on cable news networks, calling the ruling everything from a gross overreach to an insult to the Constitution. And social media? It exploded. Thousands of users rushed to Bondi's defense, posting pictures of their own crosses and religious symbols, saying, "If this is wrong, fine me too." The support came from everyday citizens and public figures alike, many of whom didn't even share Bondi's political views but agreed, this ruling went too far. Legal analysts quickly pointed out the obvious: freedom of religion doesn't stop at the courtroom door. In fact, the U.S. Supreme Court has repeatedly affirmed the right to express one's faith, even in professional environments, so long as it doesn't interfere with proceedings or coerce others. Bondi's cross didn't disrupt court. It didn't lead to any mistrials. It didn't even spark an objection during her arguments. The only issue came from someone apparently looking for something to weaponize, and a judge who, instead of applying common sense, chose to make an example out of her. Critics say this was more than just an overstep, they call it a dangerous precedent. If wearing a cross in court can cost someone $100,000, what other freedoms could be next? Pam Bondi now stood not just as a legal advocate, but at the center of a brewing cultural and constitutional storm. And as cameras followed her outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions, hoping for an emotional soundbite. Her response? Calm. Measured. Powerful. This isn't just about me. It's about every American's right to live their faith, quietly, respectfully, and without fear of punishment. And with that, she promised to appeal the fine, not Jay. Just when things couldn't get more intense, Pam Bondi stood before the appeals court, and the nation held its breath. The media buzz was louder than ever. Protesters and supporters alike gathered outside the courthouse. Inside, Bondi and her legal team were calm, prepared, and laser-focused. This wasn't just about clearing her name anymore, it was about drawing a line in the sand for freedom of expression. Her team laid out the facts with precision. Bondi's cross caused no disruption during court proceedings. There was no written rule explicitly banning religious symbols in that courtroom. And perhaps most damning, there was clear evidence of selective enforcement, with others wearing visible religious items without consequence. The courtroom was tense, still. Cameras clicked, reporters scribbled notes, and then came the moment that cut through the silence. The lead appellate judge leaned forward, eyebrows raised, and asked the question everyone had been thinking. Are we really debating whether a small cross is a threat to justice? That sentence would be replayed on news clips and viral videos across the country. The appeals court didn't need days or weeks to decide. In a swift and unanimous decision, the justices ruled in Bondi's favor. They threw out the $100,000 fine, rebuked the lower court's ruling, and openly questioned whether personal bias had influenced the original judgment. The decision sent shockwaves through the legal world, and beyond. Pam Bondi walked out of the courtroom vindicated. Cameras followed her as she smiled, gracious but firm. She thanked her legal team, her supporters, and made one thing clear. This wasn't about me. It was about standing up for what's right. But the story didn't end there. The judge who issued the original fine? He's now under investigation. A judicial review panel is probing whether his ruling was influenced by personal or political bias, and whether it violated ethical standards. Closing thoughts. Pam Bondi's case wasn't just about a necklace. It was about what that necklace represented: faith, freedom, and the right to express both, without fear. Agree or disagree with her politics, one thing is certain. Pam Bondi didn't just win a courtroom battle. She took a stand, and reminded America that freedom of faith isn't up for debate. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful and thought-provoking stories, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below. Do you think the court went too far? We want to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay informed and stay free.